Good afternoon. Kwame asked me to do this presentation on defense applications for critical minerals. It's a very serious topic. I'll try and make it fun and interesting, the first speaker after lunch. So hopefully you'll enjoy this presentation and find it useful. Just as an explanation, I am the Director of Public Affairs for Doe Run. A lot of people ask me, how'd you get that title? Like, what happened to you? I thought you were an engineer. And so yeah, it is never expected to be in this kind of role, in a non-technical role. But I've spent a lot of the last few years, particularly working with government affairs, spending a lot of time in Washington, D.C., meeting with federal agencies as well as elected officials, really trying to get out the word on critical minerals. Unless you've been living under a rock, which, no pun, most people are probably aware that critical minerals has been a very hot topic for this administration and the previous two administrations. There's a lot of programs, new programs, a lot of funding. Certainly we've been trying to do our part to engage, figure out what's going on, and particularly pursue funding, which we could very much benefit from in terms of adding new production to produce critical minerals. But I thought it was interesting, historically Doe Run was a pretty private company, privately held. Didn't really advertise what we do, so it was really a culture change for us to start talking about what we do, advertising what we do, talking to people, and going to DC, we explained to people we're a mining company, we produce critical minerals, and people were just shocked. They're like, we do mining in the United States, we do mining in Missouri, you have critical minerals, never heard of Doe Run, so it's just interesting. A lot of people are working on policy and implementation in critical minerals, and there's just not a lot of knowledge and experience of mining in the U.S. because in recent decades that really has fallen off a lot, as people are aware of. So it's just been interesting, the education process around critical minerals, including defense minerals. Doe Run is a pretty significant supplier of defense materials. We do make materials that go into alloys for batteries, for submarines, tanks, nuclear shielding, alloys for ammunition. So we've been a long-standing supplier in the defense industry, but everything we sell goes to defense contractors. So we've never had a relationship with the government directly. So when we talk to people in the federal government, they don't know who we are. They don't really know where materials come from, which I found to be interesting. And I think that's probably changing. I think the various agencies, including Department of War, is really trying to understand where these materials come from, raw materials, strategic materials. But even if you talk to defense contractors, they typically don't know where the materials come from. You know, if you're Boeing or Lockheed or these large defense contractors, they're buying components that the companies providing raw materials are very deep in the supply chain in terms of raw materials. So quite often they really don't know, or if they do know, they're not going to tell you. But that's one of the things that has come to light, that we're heavily dependent on imported materials, particularly from foreign enemies of concern, as they're labeled in DC, and imported materials for our defense supply. So I think that is changing. So I'm going to talk about some policies. There's been a long list of executive orders. I don't know if everybody's keeping up on all this new policy coming out of DC under the Trump administration. There's a long list of new presidential orders, from the executive branch, really forcing the issue around critical minerals. One of the most recent ones, a couple of weeks ago, it came out, this Executive Order 14415. It's really specific defense and defense materials. So I think this is only 3 weeks ago this came out. So they've identified critical minerals of concern as well as foreign enemies of concern where, if we're getting supplies for defense of these strategic materials, you no longer are supposed to buy material from Russia, China, North Korea, for example. So the Defense Department is trying to enforce these regulations now with defense contractors, really trying to identify and track where these materials come from, which I think is probably a lot easier said than done. And at the end of the day, if you're a defense contractor, you have to deliver. You're going to have to get materials from where you can get them. In the news these days, it's on the news every day, Iran and Ukraine. And defense stocks is a really a hot topic and a big issue. And so it's becoming more and more important to understand if we have a defense supply chain, where these materials are coming from, how quickly can we get these materials. And the landscape is changing. With the advent of drones, drone warfare, it's really changing what's a priority. So 2 years ago, we were talking to the Department of War about what's a priority. Those are shifting month to month in terms of what strategic materials we need. So it's going to be an evolving process, but at least we now have, in theory, regulations in place so that defense contractors going to have to track where they're getting these materials. Also, under the legislative branch, Congress, is in charge of the National Defense Authorization Act in terms of what gets funded for defense as well as what the requirements are. There's also new requirements in the NDAA for sourcing of what's called covered materials. And those are, again, strategic materials that they want coverage, if you will, of supply from domestic sources or from allies. And there's a regulation called DFARS, which really gets into the details of the timeline for when defense contractors are going to be required to show that they're producing these critical materials from either domestic sources or from allies. So it's really putting on the pressure, and for the first time, to really look at this and identify what's going to be produced in weapon systems. So I think it'll be interesting to see. Classically, in these types of approaches, you see waivers are also part of the process. So we may find out if certain defense contractors are unable to get these materials, and it comes down to it, there may be waivers involved in terms of getting materials. I would hope we aren't getting waivers to produce materials from Russia, for example, but I'm aware of materials now we're still buying from Russia for weapon systems. Certainly a lot comes from China. But the other part of this I'm curious to see is how much is going to be domestically sourced versus imported from allied nations. I think from our perspective as Doe Run, we're a 100% domestic producer. We'd certainly like to see incentives and rewards for domestic production over imports from foreign competitors who are also allies, countries like Australia, Korea. We need those resources. The Canadians are our good friends. I hope they still like us, and they send us a lot of material. So those are important resources, but it's become obvious that the U.S. domestic supply is continuing to decline. And again, we're one of the few handful of mines. There's only a handful of smelters in the United States. So in theory, this type of policy should see a turnaround. We should see emphasis and funding because it's required, not because of price supports, but requirements for defense contractors to actually purchase domestic material. So just backing up a second in terms of what Doe Run's doing and what we are trying to do within the defense supply chain. All of our operations, or most of our operations, are here in Missouri, and people close by are probably aware of the viburnum trend. That's where our mines are. It's one of the largest mines in the world. It's been operating for over 60 years. We produce copper, lead, and zinc from those mines, and we export all that material, unfortunately, because of the lack of domestic processing. We also have the largest battery recycling facility in the United States. It's 15% of the U.S. supply of battery recycled material. All of our customers are battery manufacturers. So we supply that supply chain as well from here in Missouri. We also have specialty fabrication in state of Washington and Arizona. We make specialty fabrication for nuclear shielding or other specialty materials and munitions. Right here in Missouri, we have a very deep portfolio of critical minerals. So everything that we now produce or have in our resources are now critical minerals. What we're known for is lead. We have maybe the world's most prolific lead deposit that's been mined for the last 300 years here in Missouri. But we do produce lead, zinc, and copper concentrates out of our mines. Within our resource, we also have cobalt, nickel, and germanium at grades that can be produced commercially. And then on the recycling side, we produce lead, recycle lead for batteries, but also tin and antimony are in the lead battery feed, and we recycle those materials, which are also critical materials. So those are the materials that we're focused on. And defense applications, certainly there's a lot of interest in cobalt, nickel, and germanium. Antimony, it's already been mentioned today. Those are kind of hot topics for defense. The Department of War has prioritized their investments. And if you've been watching the news, most of that has been indexed towards rare earth minerals and permanent magnets. It's been a huge investment in recent years. Antimony, there's the Perpetua mine and things like that. Antimony is a high priority. Germanium, you're seeing more and more interest in germanium projects. From our perspective, that's really what our opportunity here in Missouri is around the cobalt, nickel, and germanium. That's where we're most focused in our discussions with Department of War. As it was mentioned, we do have a project ongoing now through the Defense Production Act. Doe Run's been working on hydrometallurgical technologies for many years for processing minerals. We have some complex mineralogy. It's difficult to separate. And right now, we export minerals that have co-products potential that's in the concentrates. So our project here, working with the EPA, is to focus on our copper-rich minerals, which have cobalt, nickel, germanium association, and trying to pull those, separate and pull out all those minerals. Is really what this project's about. So we're well into this project. At the same time, working towards going to a commercial scale in parallel with these efforts. So the feedback we're getting from the Department of War was, that's great, can you go faster, can you go bigger? And so we're trying to do that. We're trying to fly the plane while building the production. So we're hopeful we'll be able to bring some significant, meaningful production online in years to come. With all the materials that we produce, all these critical minerals have defense applications, but they also have commercial applications. That's another key aspect of working with the Department of War. They're looking for projects that have sustainable economics. So it's not just one mineral or one material. If the price changes, your business topples. I mean, that's been one issue in Department of War trying to fund these projects, trying to understand mining and commodity prices. So the way we look at this, we've got a balanced portfolio of minerals and materials. It's not just one material. I think that's important for the government to decide to make an investment, and I think we're pretty rare in the United States to have this number of critical minerals and materials that we can produce. We have been working on this hydrometallurgical technology for about 20 years that Doe Run has been working on, and I think we're hoping to get to the step of full commercialization in the next couple of years, but it's an ammonium chloride leaching process. Dr. Heimer talked about it yesterday, so I'm not going to go into those details, but it really is geared around separating complex materials, whether it's concentrates from a mine or other materials, waste materials or byproduct materials, and trying to separate complex material. So for us, what it does here in Missouri, it not only helps us in the processing of minerals, but also in the mining process. On the mining side, we produce lead, copper, and zinc now, and we have to work really hard underground trying to separate those minerals, sort minerals, be careful what we put through the mills to get it the right grade when you got these complex mineralogy. That all goes away with the hydrometallurgical process because now you can feed bulk concentrates. So it really reduces the operating costs of the operations, which is also key for us. And then also produces byproduct minerals, the nickel, cobalt, and germanium. That would all come out of the mines. On the recycling side, we now produce lead, but with this process, we produce a high purity lead, which has more applications for nuclear shielding. And then tin and antimony, we currently manipulate the concentration of tin and antimony in the battery feed to make the right recipes for our customers, but we do purchase tin and antimony to supplement that supply. So with this new process, we wouldn't be needing to purchase tin and antimony. We'd be able to pull it right out of the batteries and then also make specialty products. Now we make certain alloys for submarine batteries and, that are unique in the United States. And so we'd be able to make more of these as we're trying to ramp up submarine production, for example. Those specialty alloys around tin and antimony are real key to that type of battery. So some of the special products that we make now and that we're focused on out of this whole portfolio, again, back to submarine batteries is a real hot topic. Germanium, the optic systems, is almost every weapon system has germanium. The United States is out of a supply of germanium other than what's in stockpile, so that's a very urgent issue. The Department Army has been pushing us to move as quick as we can to try and produce commercial germanium. Tin is another very important critical mineral. It goes into a lot of things, including batteries, and then the antimony. We already produce a lot of antimony alloys for munitions and batteries, but with, again, the situation now with stocks depleting, there's a ramp up in production of ammunition I think we'll be seeing going forward. So I think this is my last slide, and this is really just kind of a philosophical picture, these cartoons. You know, what happens today is on the left side of that cartoon, and what that shows is what we do today. We mine minerals here in Missouri, we put them on a truck, we send them to a port, get loaded on a ship, go down the Mississippi River, get on another ship, go over to Asia and Europe, and get processed. And the downside is that all the cost of those logistics is one issue, but also the byproduct minerals we're losing. You know, the cobalt, nickel, germanium, we're getting paid lead price when we sell that, for example. And we also get penalized for that as an impurity. So we get it coming and going, and then the U.S. customers wind up, you know, buying that back as being sent back across, or it stays in Asia. You know, so it's really not a smart thing for the United States, not a good business model. China has invested in about $150 billion worth of mineral processing and smelters, and our production is anemic. You know, so I think it's going to take a long time. You know, if we're going to ramp up metal production here in the United States, but you know, we got to get started. The picture on the right is our vision of the future, where we're mining materials here in the United States, here in Missouri, for example, and we are processing those materials domestically with the hydrometallurgical technology to produce these domestically, but also importing sources from other mines in the United States, or importing from Latin America here, right up the Mississippi River, Missouri being a net importer and processor of critical minerals. That's really the goal and the opportunity I think we have here in Missouri. We do have a lot of expertise. We have the minerals, we have the supply chain and the infrastructure. We just need to start competing in a more intelligent fashion to turn this around from what we do today. So that really is my recap slide. It's a pleasure to be able to be here today. And we have a great relationship with the Missouri S&T team, Mike and Lana and Kwame. We work together as partners. We do have an MOU as an industry partner with S&T, and a lot of our staff over the years have come from S&T, so we have a very strong relationship and appreciate that very much. So, with that, any questions? I told Kwame he could ask easy question.
Well, hopefully this is easy. But no, beyond Doe Run, if you look at the industry broadly, this administration is doing a lot. What would you say is effective, and what are some things out there that could change to make companies like Doe Run and others be able to accelerate development to actually get to producing not only mine, but producing the metals intermediates that we need?
Well, I don't know if anybody's going to listen to me, but I guess from my perspective, if I was looking at how to do this, I would have started with the existing mines and smelters in the United States that are already producing. Would be the easiest place to start for producing critical minerals. So whether it's Doe Run or Montana Resources in Montana or Rio Tinto in Utah, everybody is producing material and it has byproduct opportunities to capture those. We're already in production, so we don't need new permits. So to me, that would be the best place to start in terms of near-term, meaningful production of critical minerals, is working with the existing operations and funding expansion and production, as well as additional processing to pull out those byproduct materials. And that gives time to open new mines. So I think projects like Hermosa and Perpetua, those are all great projects the government's investing in. Those take time. It take years to get into meaningful production. So I would have focused more on let's work with existing mining and metals producers to produce more right away, bring on more mines, and ultimately build out the supply chain. And it took us 40 years to get into the hole. It's going to probably take that amount of time to get back out of the ditch, you know. So, but I would start investing with the existing producers. Most producers in the United States that are purely domestic are operating on negative margins right now. We're buying, for example, copper concentrates and trying to make copper metal. Importing that, if you're not an integrated supply chain, you're working on negative margins. So most of the U.S. mining and metals industry is really at a strain in terms of survival. I would invest there first, stabilize that, and then start adding production.
I see. Sorry about that. Chris, building on that question a little bit, so I'm not going to ask the unfair question, what it's like working with Department of War. I'll try to be diplomatic. What would you like to see Department of War in particular do different. Do you interact with Office of Strategic Capital for these? You know, are there some things that you could suggest in terms of focus, organization, performance, paperwork, that
Yeah,
kind of stuff?
Yeah, I can try and address that. What I find interesting is a few years ago, when we first started, our crusade to go to Washington, D.C. and pursue opportunities, there were one or two people that had critical minerals in their title, and now there's hundreds. I mean, it's just exploding in terms of the number of more interests, more programs, more people getting involved, which is great, but it's about 100 different rabbit holes to run down to figure out and navigate what kind of funding makes sense for our organization versus others. So I think there is communication now. They're trying to coordinate these activities and funding through the National Energy Dominance Council and the White House. Is that effort, but I'd say it would be nice if it was more coordinated instead of ourselves and everybody else like USSM, our friends at USSM. We're all doing the same thing, going to every single individual program and department to try and understand their funding processes, which are all different. In China, when they decide to build something, they just build it. Just write a check and build it. And here it's a very complicated maze to navigate, to figure out how to navigate each individual program department, whether it's Department of Energy, Ex-Im Bank. Every single program is now focused on critical minerals, but very few projects have actually been funded and are in construction just because of trying to navigate the complexity of the federal government. Working with the people are nice. It's all great. Everybody's got the right motivations, good policies, and it's been mostly bipartisan as well in Congress. So I think everybody is trying to row in the same direction, but in terms of efficiency and effectiveness of implementation, we're a long ways from getting a lot of significant production built just because of the inefficiency of industry and government. Doe Run had never worked for the federal government before, for example. We had no idea how to navigate that. And I think almost every mining company is the same. We don't know exactly what papers to fill out or what forms or how to work with the government, so that's all new.
We have time for one more. Oh, there's an online question. I will read it. For the commodities Doe Run is involved with, would it be more fruitful in terms of securing domestic supply chains to invest in more primary mining operations or processing capacity?
I think the critical need now is processing. We have a lot of concentrates being mined right now in the United States are being exported. So we need processing to be able to onshore that material. So to me, that's step one is the processing. And it was surprising to me to see announcements of smelters this past year. The Korea Zinc project in Tennessee, the aluminum smelter in Oklahoma. There was an announcement that M7M is supposed to be coming back online. So yeah, I was surprised to see smelter announcements, we could certainly build more smelters. From our point of view, we were prepared to build hydrometallurgical facilities to process. So it's probably a combination of hydro, pyro opportunities. But I think that's the need right now is to capture the concentrates that are now being produced in the United States. We have several mines coming online, Empire State, South 32, and there's just not any capacity for it. So it's going to wind up being exported. Perpetua doesn't yet have a process in place, for example. So the real focus and understanding that Department of War is really focused on processing right now as opposed to funding new mines.
All right, with that, please join me in thanking Mr. Neaville.
Okay.